coast to coast in Newfoundland and Labrador. This is Issues and Answers with Lynn Burry.
And welcome to Issues and Answers. Our special guest on this week's program is Scott Crocker, who is the CEO of the Autism Society of Newfoundland and Labrador. And our guest panelist, once again this week, is NTV's Heather Gillis. Scott Crocker, first of all, thank you for coming in today.
Thank you. It's very nice to be with you.
You've been on this program a number of times now, and in some ways things have changed. In many ways, they haven't. One way that they haven't really changed in any big way in a positive direction is funding for autism. We're going to get into what autism is and how many people are affected and the more specifics of autism a little later. But I want to ask you about fundraising, first of all, because the need for programs has certainly gone up over the past decade or so. And funding, though, from the provincial government has not kept pace with what you need. Tell us what's happening.
Well, our fund, I joined the organization on January 1st, 2013, and our annual core fund from government then was $580,000. And the very next year, of course, there was a reduction right across the board, and we were cut back to $507,000. And it's been like that ever since. So basically no increase in 7-8 years. And I mean, we all understand the economics and the challenging times. That's a given. It's difficult, I'm sure, for everyone. But sort of packaged with that is the fact that programming and demands and so on have more than tripled. Staffs have grown and that sort of thing. Costs have gone up. We own our own building and facilities and rent space around the province in 3 other regional offices. So costs and expenses have just gone up, while everything else, of course, remains the same in terms of core funding. Yeah.
So tell us how difficult it is for someone like you in your position as Chief Executive Officer. You have people who are looking for programs, people who are looking for help, people who need help, and you don't have the money to meet the demand. How do you cope?
Well, it's very difficult. There have been some really challenging meetings with moms and dads, absolutely, over the last few years. We don't have the luxury of being able to support children or youth or adults one-on-one, for example. We don't have student assistants and teacher aides and those sorts of things at all, so we don't have the ability to be able to accommodate. So that's obviously a big negative. Our space is totally maxed out at the center, and we turn away people who want to register and do programming. We just can't accept any more. So it's been really difficult. We've gone through exercises of trying to do on-site expansion of facilities and so on. Difficulties have arisen, but everything is sort of in place, plans, costings, those sorts of things. We are always fundraising. It never ends. I have a well-trained, experienced professional staff, 28, 29 all through the year, full-time. And it seems like all we do these last couple of years is fundraise.
And how difficult is that? Because let's face it, a lot of people are facing difficult economic times. There is only so much money people have. Disposable income is down. I think a lot of people would say they don't have the same amount of money on what you call discretionary items. So how hard has it been? You're not getting the money from the government, and it's difficult to get it from the general public.
Well, our net fundraised dollars back in fiscal 2016 approached $600,000. This past year, fiscal 2018, it was just over $300,000. So we're basically down around $300,000 net a year in terms of fundraised revenue. But we're doing more fundraising than we ever did. More activities, more in-depth activities, and people are supporting us. But you know, it's difficult, and people who support us support others too. That's the nature, I think, of a small community in a small province and so on. So everybody is suffering, certainly. There's no question about that. But it's very difficult. And what makes it even more stressful is the fact that the demand and the need, as we all know, has just grown tremendously.
It's because you had a program in 2013, or programs accommodating 111 people, and now that number is 400.
Yes.
Yes, with less money.
More than tripled, yeah.
Heather?
And why are your programs and services so important for people with autism?
Well, autism, I always say one of the chief things with autism has to do with social interactions and social impairments and so on. And the programming we do, for the most part, tries to provide social learning opportunities where some of those things can be worked on and helped and alleviated and so on. We provide adult meeting groups, for instance, off-site in the evenings around town, called Connections. We have parent support groups and so on. And we have sibling groups for brothers and sisters of children with autism. All of those things are important in the sense of the social aspect, because that is definitely one of the more challenging aspects when it comes to individuals with autism getting everything they can out of the community, out of schooling. It doesn't matter what, really.
What do you say to the government? I mean, we all know that they're in a financial crunch, but at the same time, people do need help, and you just can't say, sorry.
Yeah, I think it would be fair to say the government would like to say, goodbye, Scott. Leave us alone. But the nature of my position and the role I'm in, obviously I am always constantly, consistently asking for more funding so that we can do more for the people we work with. If I didn't do that, I would suggest I wouldn't be there very long, because that's part of the role, and I will continue to do that. Government, as we all know, and I don't know if I want to be in government right now, has some very, very difficult decisions to make. They have to make the tough choices, and it's not easy. And I acknowledge that. I think if anyone in a position of power and decision making could do what needs to be done, I don't think there's a question that everyone would do it. It's a matter of priorities and competing priorities and challenges and so on.
Well, they just gave $40 million in tax breaks to Canopy Growth. I'm sure there are a lot of people out there who would say, I don't know if I really agree with that or if that's necessary. What do you say to that?
Well, that was very interesting, and I thought that Minister Osborne's response was interesting, because he talked about how with employees and all, and sales and purchases and so on, that all that money will come back. I used that very same argument in terms of the Autism Society. With 29 employees, and we purchase services, and we purchase goods, and we pay income tax, we do it all. And the money that we get in the run of a year, the $507,500, we more than give back out in terms of those types of things.
And critics would say a $40 million tax break, it's going to take an awful long time if you're just counting on the provincial portion of taxes to get all that money back. So I guess there are many sides to that argument. Next year is an election year in Newfoundland and Labrador. Do you plan to make this an election issue?
Well, we are developing our election strategy now. We won't finalize it until in the new year. But there are 4 or 5 sort of pillars to that. We did the same thing 4 years ago. One of the things we're very interested in seeing is, prior to the last election and immediately after, when the Premier was speaking with us, commitments were made. One of the chief commitments was for a provincial autism strategy, and it was put in the mandate letter for the minister and so on. Well, that hasn't happened yet, but it's election year, and we're hopeful that sometime in the next few months they will actually roll out a provincial autism strategy. We're very keen on seeing, if they do, what's in that, and of course what role we might be able to play with them. There are always the advocacy issues that have been promised for many, many years, long before this government and with this government. One includes the removal of IQ 70, which is absolutely disgraceful to base
Tell
a
us what
person's...
that is. I know you've explained it before, but to people watching the show.
Well, IQ 70 has absolutely nothing to do with autism. People are diagnosed with autism every day, and their IQ can be 100 and it can be 60. It doesn't have anything to do with autism. It's a totally separate measure. But it's a very easy way of making a decision about, yes, you get service, no, you don't get service. That has to go. It's discrimination. I just can't believe that in 2018 we still have this on the books. And the Premier has made the commitment that that is going away. People in healthcare will tell you that, or will tell us anyway, that they're working on that right now and doing alternate training and so on. Well, we're very keen on seeing if in fact that's the case, because there are families and individuals and adults with autism suffering very, very much because of the IQ 70. Another one has to do with the wait lists and wait times and so on. We had them down, and when I say we, I mean the province, we had them down to in the area of 3, 4, 5, 6 months a year or so ago. It's back up to 18 months and more in terms of waiting for a diagnosis and so on. It's it's just not, that's not good enough. We know that the quicker we diagnose, the quicker we make interventions, the better chance those children have of living life, a much better quality life. So we can't be happy and satisfied with that. There's a lot involved in obviously making that 3 months, but it has to be a priority.
We're going to take a short break, but please stay with us. We'll be back with more of Issues and Answers. Welcome back, everyone. You're watching Issues and Answers. Our special guest on our program this week is Scott Crocker, who is the CEO of the Autism Society of Newfoundland and Labrador. And our next question comes from Heather Gillis.
Before the break, we left off talking about wait lists and how they were down to about 3 months. Now they're up to 18 months. What's driving that increase in the wait times again?
There are many things that drive the wait list, and sometimes I think it just gets out of control. It may be that people resign, transfer, people who are in positions that are involved. It may be that they're off on sick leave and they can't find replacements. There's all sorts of things, I think, that come together to make wait lists grow. Our position is simply that it needs to be really carefully monitored, and the minute you start to notice that it reaches a certain point beyond 3 months, there's a trigger, and then there's a whole action set about making sure it doesn't go beyond that. Because letting it go and letting it go and letting it get to 18 months, 20 months, and I'm being, when I say 18 months, that's what I know it is. It can be more than that. It's just not acceptable. I mean, these are our kids.
And what is the process like for diagnosis?
The diagnosis process itself isn't too lengthy or extensive, and there's usually a team involved now in the different regional authorities and so on. I think that's done very, very well. That's not the issue. It's the fact that there are so many referrals to get to the point of being assessed by the team in the different authorities and so on that it takes a while to get there, and if there's anything at all that affects the size of that team or people leave or people are off on sick leave, holidays, all those sorts of things, they all come into play in terms of delaying the response time, obviously.
What is it like having to turn away a family or the parents of a child or a child who has autism? It's very hard for most of us, I think, to imagine what it's like to have a child who suffers from autism. And I know it's a spectrum, so there's a degree in terms of symptoms. That must be heartbreaking for people at your center.
It's heartbreaking for us. It's heartbreaking for moms and dads and families and caregivers too. There's one thing when we can't accept because everything is full and there's just no more room and so on. Even then it's difficult, obviously, because people know that interventions and social learning opportunities and so on will help. So they want to get the very best they can. When it's a different issue, and as you said, it's a broad spectrum. Some people are doing very, very well without any of us and any supports and so on. Others just need some supports. And of course, there's a number that are higher needs and need more help and so on. So when we can't accept those, it might be a behavior problem, for instance. It doesn't matter when mom and dad come through the door if their child needs one-on-one support to them. But of course, we don't have the dollars or the money to have the staff to be able to provide the one-on-one support. And lots of times families have difficulty understanding that, and I understand that totally. I worked in the school system for years as a principal, delivering programs and organizing and so on. And there's times that our ability to deliver what we want to do, we just can't do it. And it's heartbreaking.
What are some of the comments that you get from families?
We have some that are very understanding, and I think it's fair to say we have some that get very, very disappointed. They're hurt. They feel like the last bit of hope they had being the Autism Society, has had to turn them away too. And people can get angry and people can get upset, and I understand that. You know, I'm a dad. I'm a dad too, and I understand that totally. There are many good things about working in this position I'm in. That is one of the more challenging ones. Not being able to deliver the help that you need to know, and you know you need to deliver it, and you just can't do it.
Is there a rural-urban divide when it comes to getting help for kids with autism, or adults with autism as well?
Well, there is. I think just like in anything, there's a rural-urban divide. The same would apply. Now, there are some very good diagnostic teams in Western region, I call it, and South Central and so on, in the different regional health authorities. But, I mean, we all know that most services and most things are concentrated on the Avalon, which is where, you know, almost 3/4 of the population, I guess, is. So it involves travel, it involves more travel, and sometimes you get to see people less frequently. For instance, in Western office, just in terms of the Autism Society, there's no programming offered from our Western Regional Office other than community recreational type programming. Same thing in South Central. We just do not have the ability to hire staff to be able to travel out and deliver the programs like we'd want to do.
We're going to take another break, but please stay with us. We'll be back with more of Issues and Answers. Welcome back. Our special guest is Scott Crocker, who's the CEO of the Autism Society, and Heather Gillis has our next question.
I just want to go back to funding for 1 second, because a couple of weeks ago, Come From Away announced it was coming to St. John's. You guys are one of the charities that will be receiving some of the money, but many of those tickets have gone out and to be sold by scalpers. What does that mean to charities like you guys?
Well, it was such a disappointment, because I was at the news conference and I'd obviously been talking to Cheryl and so on, and we were all really excited about this whole thing. It was amazing, and such a positive thing, and it didn't really matter who the charities were. It was the whole concept of giving back and so on from a show that celebrated that, and then for that to happen, it was just heartbreaking. I really feel bad for the people who've put so much time and effort into giving this to us, right? It's too bad.
Is there fundraising fatigue out there among the general public at this point? Because you mentioned earlier that you tend to go to the same people over and over again, and people who give to many charities, and sometimes I guess people are kind of, you know, I can't continue this.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely there is. I mean, every organization and every group in a small province is asking basically the same people for donations and contributions and funding support and so on, and we're all asking government as well. So it's very difficult. There's definitely donor fatigue. And there's absolutely organizational fatigue in the sense of doing that very thing. It requires a lot of time and effort to do it and do it right, and then follow up afterwards and so on. You know, Autism Society, we do not have a major corporate sponsor at all. We don't have a major funder. It's very difficult. We're depending on a broad spectrum of people in the community to support us, and that's been very challenging. With the economic times over the last couple of years, it's it's declined by half.
Yes, absolutely.
And that's basically the same amount of deficit that we're incurring as we go from year to year.
Can I ask you a question? A lot of people who really don't have any scientific knowledge necessarily of autism or any disease often wonder, why are we hearing so much about autism these days? I know when I grew up, I didn't know of anybody who had autism. Is it because there are more people out there with it, or it's being reported more because we're diagnosing people with what this is specifically now?
Yeah. I think it's a little of all of that. I think you did know people that had autism, just like I did in school, now looking back. We didn't know what it was back then. Today we do, and We're certainly diagnosing it much, much more, and that's because we know more about it, and there are more referrals being made and so on. And we're better at it and all that sort of thing. And of course, communication and all of those sorts of things are much, much better than they ever were. So all of that helps contribute to it. But I think at the end of the day, anyone and anything that I've read will tell you that in addition to all of that, there is more autism as well. And that's the challenge. Everyone is researching and trying to find out what the causes are. Not necessarily. Some people get wrapped up in cures and things like that. I don't think it's necessarily for that. I think sometimes it's to come up with better interventions and better strategies so that we can do better at helping people cope with some of the difficulties they have. It might be sensory difficulties, for instance, or social difficulties and so on. Once we know the best ways to deliver on those types of things, they'll enjoy life much, much better.
Well, Scott Crocker, we are out of time, but I want to thank you very much for coming in today and sharing the difficulties that your organization has in terms of raising money and the need you have, of course, for providing programs for people and families who are dealing with autism. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
And thank you to Heather Gillis for sitting in once again this week. That is our program. Thank you so much for watching Issues and Answers. Enjoy the rest of your day.